Emanating from the wrestling capital of the world, Calgary, Dramatic Pond, Alberta, Canada, and broadcast to the world at www.stormwrestling.com and www.liveaudiowrestling.com. This is Storm Warning, your weekly audio check-in with Extreme Championship Wrestling superstar Lance Storm.
Lance, how's life in Calgary today?
Oh, pretty good. We're getting a Chinook, so it's warming up.
Oh, wow. I bet you don't want to go to Florida now.
Well, I'm not going to go that far. I'm hoping it'll be still warmer in Florida.
A lot of things we want to touch on this week, including some really excellent emails we got this week. But the big news, it appears that everything is over in Atlanta, and I'm not talking about the Storm. Benoit, Saturn, Dean, and Eddie Guerrero. It looks like they're all going to get their releases from World Championship Wrestling. We presume they'll all end up in the World Wrestling Federation. What are your thoughts about the whole Atlanta situation, how it was handled by both sides?
I think probably both sides could have handled it better. But, you know, once the ball starts rolling in wrestling, it's sort of hard to turn back. So, you know, once you make a commitment, you got to stay with it. And both sides seem to pretty much, you know, stand by their guns. So hopefully, you know, the company will survive without them and get a direction and start pursuing it. And hopefully the four guys will find comparable employment.
What are the boys in ECW saying about it?
I think there's a few guys that are sort of concerned. You know, the middle guys that have been working really hard, you know, like a guy like a Danny Doring on a Roadkill, like not them per se, but guys like that, you know, they sit back and think, oh, geez, you know, is Eddie Guerrero coming back? Is Dean Malenko coming back? You know, so it's sort of that, you know, are we going to have to take a step backwards again?
Right.
You know, I remember when Jericho was in Atlanta, you know, we used to talk about that. It's like, you know, when you know, Kurt Hennig came in and Bret Hart came in, he said, you know, it was very, very frustrating because every time you take a step forward, they bring in another guy, another big jump from the other company, and it's like you end up taking a step back. So I think there was a lot of underneath guys that were concerned. I think, you know, I think a couple of those guys would have been huge assets. I would have loved to have seen Eddie Guerrero come in.
Oh.
You know, he could have had some really good matches with, you know, with Rob or with Jerry or myself.
Sure.
Well, anybody pretty much, you know, a guy like that. But
You know what would have been interesting would be Dean Malenko and Little Guido for some mat work.
Yeah, actually, I would have loved to work with Dean. I would have loved to just, you know, go in there and wrestle for 20 minutes.
Yeah, what's your opinion of all those four guys?
As far as workers, they're tremendous. You know, Benoit, quite possibly is the best worker out there right now. I think, you know, a guy like Dean and Eddie are probably two of the best wrestlers as far as just, you know, mat wrestling and doing stuff. I've worked with two of his brothers. I worked with Chavo and Mondo once in Lebanon. Unfortunately, we were getting stiffed on our money, so we didn't work that hard, but we had a lot of fun. But, you know, they're all really talented guys, and they'll assumedly either end up on Raw in a couple of weeks, or maybe one or two of them could end up with us, but we'll have to wait and see.
Anyone sending any demo tapes or making any phone calls to Atlanta from the ECW end of things?
I wouldn't be surprised, but you know, no one that wouldn't be doing it all the time anyway.
Right.
You know, I think everybody likes to keep their eyes and ears open. I think most of our guys are probably committed to a contract at this point in time, so they probably have to wait till their time comes running out. I think the biggest loser in this is Raven.
Oh, I know. He walked out at the wrong time.
You know, well, not only that, but you know, I think he was figuring that, you know, his contract was up in August, and he's going to be the big hot free agent. You know, the only guy whose contract is up this year, and all of a sudden four more guys are just jumping ahead of him, and it's like if he had plans on going to New York, they may not have room for him. But then again, he could, you know, go back to Atlanta, and hell, they could give him the Booker job. Who knows?
I don't know how much longer Atlanta's going to be the number 2 company, stemming from an excellent rating this week on TNN and, you know, plummeting ratings in Atlanta. You guys are really poised. We've talked about this the last couple of weeks. You guys are really poised to take that number 2 slot.
Yeah, I'm really hoping because Acclaim's going to be kicking in here pretty quick with their ad campaign. I actually had the chance to have dinner with their public relations guy, Jay. I don't remember his last name. Actually, I do. I just can't pronounce it. This past weekend, and you know, their paper ads are already hitting in the gaming magazines and wrestling magazines, which should really boost us. Our ratings are growing, and you know, we hit a milestone. Excuse me. That 1.5 was sort of a milestone that we were really hoping to hit, and like we didn't hit it for the show, but we did hit it on a quarter hour, which means, you know, a lot of homes.
That's the first time that ECW was seen in 1 million households.
Yes, and I wasn't wrestling at the time.
It was when they did that, when they had the ending of the Tajiri Super Crazy match and the overlap with Sabu and RVD and Mike Awesome, I think.
Yeah, so I heard it was one of the best matches you've seen in a long time with Tajiri and Crazy, and that's saying something. And then the angle, which I still haven't seen, I've only seen half the show, the angle with Rob, Sabu, and awesome, which is, I've had it explained to me, and I heard it was really, really hot. So,
That heel turn was one of the finest heel turns of the last couple of years.
as good
in
as the
all.
big shows?
Which one?
Which one exactly?
Which heel turn are you talking about?
He's only had 6 of them in his first year.
The 14th heel turn, the 17th heel turn. Which one? Which one, Lance?
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to the TNN show last week, easily the best show you guys have done. Right from Cyrus and Gertner to the Impact players, and then the entire roster parading out kind of like ECW dominoes. What goes into putting that sequence together?
Most of it's just all, concocted in Paul's head. Oddly enough, a lot of it probably happens 10 minutes before we do it.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys that really likes to, book emotionally. He doesn't like just to sit back and do it all months in advance. He really likes to feel things out as they go. So it's, it's just sort of, Paul likes getting like 3 or 4 different segments in his head and having them all tie together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really helps because when we only have an hour show, if you have too many guys, one guy coming in, they finish up, they leave, the next guy comes in, and it just drags the show out.
Mm-hmm.
Where when you can, have, when, I'm wrapping up with Danny and Roadkill, have, Dreamer and Raven run out, and then we're sort of on our way out as the other guys are coming in, and it just speeds up the segment, makes for faster TV.
Oh, and it's a totally creative way to do run-ins as well. The
The
whole sequence is one big run-in.
Yeah, there was one time in Buffalo. Paul unfortunately ended up with technical difficulties with cameras. We missed a lot of it. But he had actually an entire show booked as one continuous segment.
No way.
It was the entire hour. It was the week that we did when the Dudleys beat Rob for the tag straps.
Right.
Way back a while ago. And it was originally going to be an entire segment, beginning to end, the entire show. And we did it, and it went not too bad. But they had just a ton of camera problems and stuff that a lot of the footage ended up getting missed. The cameras buggered up or whatever, and they ended up having to really hack up the show, and it turned out to be a complete disaster.
Be interesting to do a pay-per-view like that, though.
Ooh, that'd be
a nightmare to put together.
Yeah, it would just be really, really hard because you wouldn't want to get at the end of the show and realize you're running short or running long and having to try to change that on the fly. Right.
Yeah. Well, you guys certainly are the most creative company out there. Your commentary this week on StormWrestling.com, a real wake-up call to TNN.
Yeah, it'd be nice if someone at TNN would actually read it. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from a few fans. The only negative comment I got was I got one guy that was pretty hard on me for cutting on Dukes of Hazzard. And actually, that really wasn't the intent. That was a great show in its day, and I always get a kick out of it. But it was sort of just an example I could use as a tie-in. And since I figured I actually knew the names of the one in Duke and Daisy, I figured, well, I'll plug Tom Wopat and Catherine Bach. So
it was nice to see them get their names out there anyway in the spectrum of professional wrestling, nonetheless.
Yeah, maybe they are ECW fans.
For those of you that haven't read it, check out Lance's commentary this week. Like we said earlier, a real wake-up call to TNN. Can you expand on your comments a little bit?
I just hope I don't end up getting heat over it with any of the TNN people. Maybe Will Bird will give me a chewing out next week. But I think it's, so many people in the company are just so frustrated that we see people putting money into failing products when they don't seem to want to put a cent into us.
Right. You're not talking about Rock and Bull, are you?
Yeah, no kidding. Or even the Monster Truck. Like this past weekend, the Monster Truck lead-in show to us drew a 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
We come all the way up to a 1.5 at the end, which is like 3 times their show. And then literally half the people watching at that time turned off as soon as Roller Jam started.
I was one of them.
Yeah, and I was another one. But, so I think TNN really needs to look at perhaps, extending our show, which would be fabulous, or at least putting some money behind it and, the possibility of us pulling a 2 rating. Because from what I understand from an ad revenue standpoint, like a 2.0 is a real milestone as far as what you can charge for advertising.
Right.
And, with a little bit of effort, we could get a 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that would mean, a ton more ad revenue for TNN.
Mm-hmm.
So if they would, open up the purse strings, give us some cash, advertise it, maybe even give us a second hour, they could end up with a 2-hour show pulling a 2.0 or higher rating, which would be unheard of by the standards of TNN.
Oh, absolutely. And they get a piece of your house shows, too, if it goes up, too, right? Isn't it?
That's what I heard. Like, I haven't heard that from anybody, just from reading on the net and stuff. I was of the impression that any increased revenue over previous years, they would get a cut of. So if our pay-per-view buys went up, if our house shows went up, they would, in turn, see some cash.
Right.
So you would think, getting us into 1 million, 2 million homes would be advantageous to TNN.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I think some of the people there still have it in their head that, wrestling is, lowbrow entertainment. And, they're not realizing that it's a pretty mainstream thing now. You had Goldberg at the American Music Awards. You've got guys doing, Regis and Kathy Lee. You've got like mainstream people. You know, you had what's his face, Austin doing Nash Bridges and pulling good ratings.
Oh, and you got someone, you got a bestseller on the New York Times book list. You've got, two. You got The Rock and Mankind on there. You've got a Grammy-nominated song in Enter Sandman.
That was like the worst song on the album as far as I was concerned.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of dug it.
Really?
I'm just a mark for that song to begin with.
I think the problem is it was such a successful song, the original one,
Yeah.
that and the fact that I only heard it like about 1.5 billion times in ECW, that hearing a different version of it isn't good.
Right.
Because you're just so used to the other version. So perhaps it's not a bad song so much as just when you're so used to hearing it the one way.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to hear it every night.
This past weekend, Josh Wilcox of the New Orleans Saints got into the product mix. Lance, what's your thoughts on traditional athletes getting into wrestling? I'm thinking of like Lawrence Taylor, Dennis Rodman.
The traditional athletes that decide to take it up, professionally full time, I've got respect for, because they're going to try to commit and do it. And I think Wilcox actually wants to.
Oh yeah.
Actually do wrestling, but it's very frustrating when you see guys that are, and it's probably more the promoters bringing them in than them trying to get in. But it's very frustrating seeing a guy like, say, Dennis Rodman, who has got more money than he knows what to do with to begin with. And he's coming in, he doesn't care about wrestling, for the most part probably doesn't even like wrestling, and he's just doing it for the sake of, whatever, they're paying me a ton of money, I'll go hang out with my buddy. And they're taking money out of, the mouths of, the boys that have paid a ton of dues and work really hard and care about what they do.
And have to be there after they're gone.
Exactly. So, they show up, make $1 million for a match, and they fall asleep and have a nap on the turnbuckle. Meanwhile, guys are starving trying to get a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I find that very, very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who do you think's done it well? Anyone?
Lawrence Taylor had a good match, but I would credit that 99% to Bam Bam, because Bam Bam is A, ridiculously talented, and B, he's via Japan had a chance to work with a lot of non-wrestlers and had to try to carry them.
Right.
But I certainly don't see any of the guys that just come in for a one-time deal that ever actually produced much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think they produce the buy rates and stuff, for the most part. That a non-wrestling fan, which is what they try to draw by bringing in the Jay Lenos and so forth, I don't think a non-wrestling fan is going to spend $40 to see him on a pay-per-view. They'll wait and hear about it in the news and read the paper the next day. They're not actually going to spend $40 to watch a wrestling show that they wouldn't have watched anyway.
Although I think Mike Tyson really helped that. Was it WrestleMania 14?
Yeah, he probably could have, because he was, I think boxing fans and wrestling fans are a little bit closer knit.
Right.
So I think you could get a crossover, and Mike Tyson fans are used to spending $60 on pay-per-view, so dishing out $30 to watch him again on a wrestling show isn't that bad.
To throw a worked punch.
But nobody spends, $50 to watch Jay Leno. They watch him for free.
Sure.
So they're not going to spend $45 to pay for him. Or even, watching Dennis Rodman, they watch him play basketball. They don't have to dish out $40 for him.
Mm-hmm.
Where a Mike Tyson, they're used to spending money to see this guy, so they're willing to spend money to see him again.
Mm-hmm.
So he may have been the only guy that actually maybe produced the money, but I don't know if he produced as much as he actually earned.
He earned $3 million. I don't know if he WWF
it was like
made
one time when I was in Europe, they brought me in for a special show, and they brought Ultimate Warrior in for a special show the following week, and I actually made the promoter more money. Because primarily I was paid so much less than he was.
Right,
but,
right.
We both sold the place out. They elevated the ticket prices to sell it out, but what they ended up paying him was more than what he had made in addition.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, you're drawing a house, but at what expense?
Right. No, that's a good point. Some sad news in the world of professional wrestling 2 nights ago. Former ECW wrestler, and I guess he was on the WCW wrestler when he passed away, Bobby Duncombe Jr., dying from what looks like an overdose of painkillers and booze. Did you know Bobby Duncombe Jr.?
I know him a little bit. He was in ECW when I was there, probably only for about a dozen matches or so. Seemed like a really, really nice guy, and it's just a real sad trend that we keep seeing.
Mm-hmm.
That I think the boys and promoters are going to have to wake up and realize that we're not invincible, which unfortunately a lot of people start believing. You go out there and be larger than life in front of the crowd, taking the bumps and doing the moves, and you start believing it. And there's been a lot of guys die over the last little while, and all seem to be of the exact same thing. And I think we got to start waking up.
How bad is the drug problem in wrestling?
I don't. It's really tough. I don't know if it's any worse than anywhere else, because I'm not anywhere else. There's certainly a handful of guys who definitely have a big problem, and then there's a bunch of guys that take an occasional pain pill and I don't think have a problem, and I don't think it's anybody's business a little bit that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the handful that don't take a thing whatsoever.
Right.
So it's just getting a grasp on the guys that really do have a problem, and even if it's not to the point where you drug test for penalties, for punishment and so forth, it's just, drawing a line and saying, look, I know you work for me. We need to settle this down. I don't want to see you die, and forcing them to do it. If you have to threaten their job for it, so be it. But we don't want to be losing any more guys.
The problem there is if one promoter says, we're drug testing, or no, you can't do this, there's a promoter down the street that'll hire that guy in a second.
That's the problem, with each, that's an advantage why, an NFL or something, it would be easier to do it because it's league-wide. But, if Vince wants to, crack down and say, look, we're not tolerating this is the best for the business, you fail a drug test, it's like, well, I can just, release me, I'll go somewhere else.
Right.
So it's really, really hard, and that's why, I think, unfortunately, you need to get, the closer friends and promoters who can take, more of an active stand if you can to just try to help guys out and not necessarily be a heavy and say, okay, you're taking a drug test, you fail, you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
And just try to do something and waken some people up and say, look, you're risking your life. You don't want to die at 35 because there's been, half a dozen in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's really outrageous. Let's get to some emails. This comes in from Curtis Harding from Vancouver, dramatic pause, British Columbia, Canada. Hello, Lance. I have only been watching ECW since it's been on TNN, and because of this, I have only ever seen you as a member of the Impact Players. I have two questions. My first question is simple. How did you and Justin Credible originally come to be Impact Players? And my second question is, who do you most enjoy working with in the ring? Is there anybody in ECW right now that on any given night you could just jump in the ring with and pull off a 5-star match, no problem?
Justin and I came together, actually. I trained him back in '92 in Calgary. And when we first started in ECW, we both wanted to work against each other, and Paul never actually gave us the chance. And he was doing we were both sort of half doing a feud with Dreamer off and on at the time, and there was a match we needed, and Paul set up a 3-way dance at the arena. I think it was the arena was the first one we did. And so we did where we were both the heels and he was a babyface, so we united to beat up poor Tommy. And so we worked with each other sort of in that match to wrestle with Tommy Dreamer, and I don't know whether Paul just happened to say, hey, this could really work. And so he ended up putting us together from there. The name actually, Justin rather, wanted to come up with some kind of group name, not necessarily a tag name, but like a faction name, a la DX or something.
Right.
And so we were pressing on Paul saying, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Paul came up with the name. We both hated it. Tried to come up with something better, never did, and then now we are both in love with the name and think it's great.
What kind of names did you flirt with?
We never really had anything. We were just really, really sort of, I don't know, and never come up with anything. So after about 3 weeks of TV, it's like, well, you can't turn back now.
Yeah, that's true. The second question, who do you most enjoy working with in the ring? The person you know. I think I know who you're going to say.
Yeah, the illustrious Jerry Lynn.
There he is.
I think even with his bad ankle, I could kick out a 4-star match with that guy. Yeah, he's easy to work with, and it's almost impossible to have a bad match with the guy.
Yeah. How's his foot doing?
I haven't talked to him this week yet. I've been really busy since I've been home. I talked to him, I think, on Thursday. He said it was extremely huge and black,
Eesh.
and he wasn't getting around on it very well. So it's going to be a couple weeks for sure.
This one comes in from Brent Little. Thank you, Lance, for having such a great site. I really enjoy your weekly audio commentary. Congrats on becoming one half of the ECW Tag Team Champions again. My question for you is, do you feel that managers/women help out much when you're trying to give a push to a wrestler? Sometimes it helps out, while other times it doesn't. Example, since Thorne and Roadkill have Elektra, they've become fan favorites in a quick time, while in WCW, David Flair had Tori Wilson, but he didn't get over well with the fans. From your experience, why does this work sometimes when other times it doesn't?
I think on the whole it generally helps, especially if it's an underneath guy, because once you're given a manager, be it a girl or not, then fans view you as someone that they're going to do something with.
Right.
You wouldn't spend the time and the money between putting a manager behind somebody if you're just going to have them, sit on the undercard. So I think it gives immediate credibility that, okay, we're going to do something with these people. It certainly doesn't hurt to have an attractive woman with large breasts come out through the curtain with you. It guarantees you a pop every night.
No one's ever gone wrong doing that.
No, exactly. I think where, it can hinder is, someone like David Flair, who, is still somewhat lacking in his father's charisma. And you
Diplomatic way of saying that.
Yeah, that's a subtle way of putting it. I think he knows what I mean. And you put him with, a woman who really, really stands out as being really, really hot. It ends up taking the focus off him.
And it exposes him, too.
Instead of being an addition or an accent to his character, it ends up just eating up his character, and he's, a little bit lost. The new girl he has him with seems to be working better with him.
Oh, Daphne.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nicer pair.
Yeah, because it's sort of got a little bit, weirder. It blends better into his personality and doesn't just have this, you see a David Flair match, like, well, I'll just stare at Torrie Wilson all through it, and you don't even, acknowledge that David's out there.
I still maintain the reason they put Torrie with David was to go out there and expose him and embarrass him.
It wouldn't be the first Flair they tried to do that with.
No kidding. No kidding. And to this day, Rick still won't come back because he's not happy with what they're giving him.
Well, if anybody deserves to be treated well, it's him. So I hope he holds out and gets what he wants, or becomes governor, whatever he wants to do.
This one comes in from Lance Storm's biggest mark, Jason from Riverside, California. Lance, in your years of wrestling, you've had more than a couple of tag team partners, I'm sure, but the most famous two are Chris Jericho and Justin Credible. My question is, of the two, who did you enjoy tagging with more? Did you mix better with one or the other? Have you had any wrestling style clashes with either of them? And if you could pick a dream partner to wrestle with, who would it be?
It's so different because I was with Jericho as a babyface, and with PJ I was a heel. And not to mention I was a lot greener when I was tagging with Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy more the heel so much that I end up enjoying tagging with PJ more than I did with Chris. But Jericho and I had a ton of fun. I thought our timing was, absolutely impeccable between us when I tagged with Chris, because we trained together, we worked together, we did everything together. So we really had a ton of fun, but I just enjoy more now that I'm, obviously a better worker, and I enjoy being a heel. So as a result, I end up, enjoying working with Justin more. There isn't anybody out there I'd rather tag with than Justin right now, so I don't know who a dream partner would be other than staying with him.
When you were with the Thrill Seekers with Chris Jericho, you had that blonde rat tail, that little ponytail at the back of your head. Whatever happened to that?
I just got really, really tired of it. I had to diet frequently, and I was constantly having to condition it and protein pack it and take care of it because it was just like a chunk of straw hanging out the back of my head.
Uh-huh.
And, when I have short hair that I do, it's not a lot of maintenance, and that thing really was. So I just got tired of it, and I actually offered to have it cut off. I offered to let the Triple Threat do it when we had their big breakup.
You should have done it. Yeah, you should have done that as an
And
angle.
they didn't seem to want to, so I'm like, okay, and I just cut it off myself.
Oh, what a waste.
I thought so.
Should have gone to Mexico and sold it.
Yeah.
Hair versus mask, or rat tail versus mask.
There you go.
This one comes in from Justin Leeper. Hey, Lance. Really like watching your work, and something about your slogan gets me laughing every time. The main reason I'm writing this is to ask you something which you said in the ECW Hardcore Revolution video game, which, by the way, comes out Thursday, February 17th, hardcorerevolution.com. There's your shameless plug. I work for a video game magazine and website. In one of your opening taunts, you say, "You're just another person to carry. At least you're not a blonde guy named Chris." At first, I thought it was alluding to Jericho and your experience with him. Plus, I recall Justin Credible ribbing him on his website or something. Then I thought it might be regarding Chris Candido. Which was it, or was it merely a blanket statement about both of them?
It was pretty much just a run-of-the-mill joke about the both of them. I had done a few promos in the past about, coming into my own, I'm not going to be saddled by a bunch of blonde guys named Chris anymore. It was just sort of ironic that, especially at the time, because I was, ECW tag champs with Candido, so I had, tag success with both, and they're both blonde guys named Chris. So it was just sort of a funny thing that I had done as a promo once, so I figured I'd throw it in as a running rib with Jericho in the video game.
That's a nice one. Any new news on the Hardcore Revolution video game?
No, it's, I think the print ads have hit gaming magazines and wrestling magazines this week. And other than that, everything's still going ahead for Hardcore Thursday, February 17th.
Cool. This one comes in from Brett Williams from Averill Park, New York. I have a question regarding Johnny Smith. Oh, I was wondering when we're going to get one of these. I'm wondering if he's still under ECW contract. I know he's right now touring with All Japan, which I feel is the greatest promotion alive. But last we saw him, he was the third member of the Impact Players of the Anarchy Rules pay-per-view and getting a chair busted over his head by Balls Mahoney. What's up with Johnny Smith, Lance?
I don't think he was ever, well, I know he was never actually under ECW contract. Paul brought him in between Japan trips the one time, because he'd been in like a year or two before that for a couple shots, and Paul really loves his work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that unfortunately he's got a really good deal with All Japan, so he won't give that up right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he constantly goes back, and he's had a couple trips back to back, so he's never had enough time to really be, to warrant bringing back in. He was never actually like sort of a full-fledged member of Impact Players, so to speak. He was just sort of along with the mix, because of the Calgary background, and I really sort of pushed to get him in because I'm a huge mark for his work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if he ends up getting more time in a row off from All Japan, we'll probably see him come back. He's a really good worker, and he actually had a match with Rob on a house show once after the pay-per-view. Oh,
yeah?
And it was a phenomenal match. I thought it was far better than the Balls match from pay-per-view.
Yeah, why did you guys swerve him out of the main event at Anarchy Rules?
I think Paul was afraid because it was an unknown match, and he, is so protective of Rob. Balls and Rob had some, literally like 4 or 5 star matches on the road with each other that really, really clicked good and strong. So I think he just felt it was a safer match. and so he, I think, just went for that out of caution for Rob, and I think it was probably, in hindsight, which is always 20/20, a bit of a mistake, because their first match was great.
Mm-hmm. There's a follow-up to that Brett Williams email here. It's P.S. I saw you wrestle in October at the Schenectady Sports Center in New York, and you were fabulous. Will you be there ever again?
I would imagine we will be back. I don't have my schedule too far in advance, other than I think the first week of February. I don't even know where we're going after that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine we'll be back. I don't remember who I worked on that show. Maybe it was Jerry, if I was fabulous.
Speaking of schedules, this week you guys are in Florida. You got Tampa on the 27th, Fort Lauderdale on the 28th. That's a TNN taping. And then 29th in Orlando. Is Dusty pretty much a sure thing for this weekend?
I know for sure TV, but I have a funny feeling he's going to be there the whole weekend. The first night's actually St. Pete's, which is, only like 10 minutes from Tampa. But yeah, I'm of the impression he's going to be there the whole weekend. For sure the TV taping, because I believe he said see you next weekend after I left New Orleans last week.
Oh, cool. You had a chance to talk to Dusty then?
Well, just a little bit. We were both staying at the same hotel, and he was in the lobby checking out when I was checking out. So.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, best of luck this weekend in Florida, and we'll talk to you next week, Lance.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Fans, if you want Lance to answer your questions on this show, email us at lancestorm@home.com. And don't forget to check back often at www.stormwrestling.com, the official website of Lance Storm for news, updates, and commentary. Retransmission in whole or in part of this broadcast without the expressed written consent of Lance Storm and live audio wrestling is strictly prohibited.